welcome to Long Lost Friends. I'm Elizabeth Eve King.
And I'm Andrea Goyan. Elizabeth and I used to do improv comedy together back when we were 19.
But we lost touch.
And then a couple of years ago, we found each other again and discovered
I'd become a painter, a writer, a performer, a Pilates teacher, an animal lover, and a biologist.
Hey, I'm a painter, performer, writer, Pilates teacher, animal lover, and well, okay, I'm not a biologist, but we're long lost friends. And we're both speculative fiction writers.
My work has appeared in MetaStellar.
MetaStellar, for those of you who don't know, is an online magazine that specializes in publishing original science fiction, horror, and fantasy. There's a link below. Today, we're thrilled to be speaking once again with Charlton Pettus. Charlton is a musician. He's been with Tears for Fears since 2000 as a guitarist, co-writer, and producer. He is also a writer. He has a novel out, Exit Strategy. And he is also currently working on developing a television show called Kindergarten the Musical for Disney. He's in development at Disney with that. So today, though, we really wanted to talk to Charlton and pick his brain a little bit about songwriting and that world, and maybe how it compares to novel writing, which is kind of crazy. Maybe not a comparison at all, but welcome, Charlton. And
yeah, welcome.
How are we all?
I think this part of us is pretty good. How about you?
Oh,
so far, so good.
Yeah, we're so excited to have you. I'm a big fan of Tears for Fears. And yeah, how did you, and when you write like a song, do the lyrics come first, or does the music come first, or do they come together, or is it different?
All in
usually I think a little bit of it comes lyric and music together, and then all the rest is, you know, what's the story they always say? It's basically you take a block of marble and chip away everything that's not an elephant.
Only if you're writing a song about an elephant, though.
Well, exactly. But that's the thing. Like, you always get, generally, you get a little piece kind of for free. The universe gives you a little piece, and then the rest is just misery.
When did you first start songwriting?
When I was a little kid, I mean, you know, probably third grade, fourth grade.
Kindergarten musical.
Exactly. Shortly after kindergarten.
So, how is, I mean, is it similar to writing poetry or really different? I know nothing about it. Except that
I don't know very much about it either, to be honest. I mean, you know, yeah. It's definitely different from fiction writing and wildly different from screenwriting in that intention comes in really late. Like, you know, writing fiction, you kind of need to know sort of where you're headed, unless you're, you know, doing arty-farty stuff. If you're actually trying to make a coherent story, you definitely need to know something about where you're headed. In songwriting, you know, it's you're irrationally gambling on your subconscious giving you gifts of some quality on a random day. You know, you're kind of sitting there and something good's supposed to magically fall out, and that's kind of how it works. You sit there and hope something that doesn't suck comes out.
A lot of noodling.
Yeah, there's noodling. I mean, it's funny. I don't know if you meditate, but it's related to meditation. It's sort of a bag of tricks to get your conscious, you know, the homunculus, the driver, to shut the fuck up so you can hear the subconscious, who's always much better at it, say stuff once in a while.
That's
you're distracting yourself so you don't talk all the time. You know, it's like having a conversation where there's someone who's really good and almost never talks, and there's someone who's not very good and won't shut up, and you're trying to shut that voice up.
It's a lot like life.
Yeah, totally.
Do you write usually with another musician, or do you write alone a lot?
um, Both. I think as a producer, you get asked to write with people a lot. And what we don't tell you is that 99% of the time, the good thing was something we came up with before you got there, and then pretended to discover anew in your presence. You feel involved, but it's mostly something that works better when no one's watching.
So do you mean, by that, do you mean sort of when you're in a room alone, it works better when you're doing it by yourself, or?
100%. Doing it. Yeah, I mean, trying to write in front of people is A, stressful, and B, because it's stressful and because we're cowards, we fake it. We fall back on stuff we know, sort of. So it's never your best stuff. Best stuff happens, you just wake up, you have kind of a little bit of a dream still kicking around, or you're totally distracted because you should be doing something else, mixing something that's due tomorrow. These are the times when good ideas come. It's a way to get out of doing whatever you're supposed to be doing.
That makes sense.
But when the job is write something good right now, it pretty much never works.
Well, I don't think that works for most people with anything.
But if you think about pop radio, that's what pop radio is. Pop radio is every song is a song written by a committee of people under enormous pressure to write a hit right now. And that's why there's that kind of sameness about so much of it.
When did that sort of shift? Do you know when that sort of shifted? Because I've heard about that in the last couple of years, but I'd never known that before.
I think it's always been that, right? I mean, that's what the Brill Building was. The Brill Building was the place where you go to crank out the hits.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's only been more or less, I don't know, the last 30, 40 years that songwriters had to write their own music. I mean, because it used to be you had songwriters and you had singers, and they weren't, they didn't have to be the same. It started with, I don't know what, maybe, because Elvis didn't have to.
Yeah, no, I would say it's the 60s. The 60s created this whole, let's see how many people I can offend, this whole generation of narcissists pursuing this fantasy of the singer-songwriter who was also breathtakingly attractive and desirable. I mean, it's Joni Mitchell's fault, practically all by herself.
Joni Mitchell, you can't say that about Joni.
Yeah, and she can paint too. No, she should.
Of course, because she's perfect and everyone wants to be Joni. So now you got to be Joni. And you hired dozens of people to try and make sure you can be Joni.
Wow.
But I have seen, and this was, I don't remember, it was some pop star, young, very attractive, but when they were finished with, she just sang and they hadn't done all the stuff to, and then when they finished with her, she was, ridiculously gorgeous beyond belief. And, I don't know. I don't, and then, they're going to tamper with their voice and everything else. So it's all, it's very much.
It's fantasy. I mean, that's,
everything
pop music is. Pop music is, you're selling a fantasy. It's funny, I was just working with this country guy, and kind of the distillation of the difference between pop and country was pop is all about selling something you could never be, and country is all about basically celebrating normal people, normal life, right? So if you're a fan of country music, the idea is all these people go around the block to tell you that your life is the best possible life. Whereas in pop world, it's the opposite. It's like, you can never have what we have.
That's interesting. I never thought of it that way, but that's.
Then what do you think about rock or alternative?
I think it's a version of the pop thing. I mean, rock is the male version of the same thing. It's fantasy, it's the fans, the groupies, all this stuff that isn't really there, but you're pretending there's this great, fantastic world backstage, the most boring place on planet Earth. But in the vivid imagination, that's where the parties are happening. It's David Lee Roth and supermodels, and it's not. It's people sitting around drinking bubbling water. It's nothing. But yeah, that's the fantasy we're selling, right?
Well, yeah, more and more in society, not even just in music, things like the appearance thing, the Kim Kardashian butt and shit.
All right, so now we're going down the Instagram is destroying our planet world.
Well, yeah, sort of. Sorry,
yeah, no, it's a given. It's a given. I know.
So when you write you've written so many different kinds of things, styles. Do you approach them really differently? It sounds like you do a little, but do you have a favorite, or is it just depend on the day? If you could just wake up and write without any pressure, what do you think you'd write?
You wouldn't write very much, I don't think. I mean, I think it's doing it professionally is funny because, like we were talking about earlier, like there's this idea that you're going to do it today, and the thing you write today is going to be great. And we all know we write one, maybe two things a year that we actually think are good. But from your writing, there's a craft component and an art component, which is to say, the guy who talks a lot and won't shut up is very good at the craft, and the guy who almost never talks is good at the art. And the art bit, the good, the kind of ineffably good thing you get is really, really rare. And when you don't have that, you rely on craft. You fall back on just taking whatever you got and turd polishing it into something that seems like it's good. But I think we all read tons of things and listen to tons of things that we kind of know only seem good. You know what I mean? Like they're not actually good. So we do that a lot.
Do you think you find that more in writing songs or fiction, that you have that? I mean, probably, because to me it seems more like lyrics of a song seem more like that would just be art, but I don't do it. But when I do poetry, it's usually more like that. Whereas, fiction, I mean, sometimes you're lucky and it just flows out and it's whatever, but that's so rare. I find that, a lot of it's tinkering.
Yeah, I mean, I think in fiction, you get these little flashes of good stuff, and then you end up with this kind of map, either in your head or on paper, where you're like, I know I have a really good bit here, and I know I have a pretty good bit here. I have no idea what these two things have to do with each other. But then craft guy comes in and says, well, you kind of build a bridge over here, and songwriting's the same. Like, the big difference with songwriting is the way it sounds is important. So, a lot of times when people are writing, they'll sing nonsense words that you actually don't know. Not only do you not know what they mean, they may not even be real words. There's a famous story about that. Remember that song, I Want It That Way? It was a big hit, Backstreet Boys or something, or NSYNC. Anyway, it's a completely incoherent, meaningless lyric that they tried to replace for, I don't know, a year or something. Never got anything that sounded as good. So in the end, they went with this lyric that literally doesn't mean anything. It's just gibberish, but it sounds good. And that's, unlike poetry, sort of, and unlike fiction, definitely, like the sound of the words is almost the most important thing to kind of convey your emotional story. So, craft comes in and trying to select consonants to make the vowels that you're now stuck with mean something.
So you mentioned that sometimes the lyrics will come first a little, or a little bit of that, then a little bit of music. So as you're coming up with these sort of nonsense things or coming up with words that sound good, is the tune just sort of happening along with it? Or I think that's a mystery to most of us. Is it? I mean,
no, I think they kind of go in tandem. Like, if the thing that pops in your head is My Favorite Martian, just because your thing, then you're like, all right, so what does that mean? And then if you have that little shape in the melody, how do you get there? And how does that pay off? I mean, there's a lot of 2x4s and nails and just kind of, building a shape to support the bit, means something.
It feels like magic.
It feels magic,
it's supposed to feel like magic.
But even more than a song feel like magic, a musical. I mean, can you tell us about the musical? Is this the first musical you've written? What's the writing process like? Is it everything going to be sung, or is it going to talk and then sing?
We were going to hit on that in our next session with Charlton. We were going to talk just about the musical.
Oh, is the musical the animated one?
Yeah. So we were going to talk about that. Although we could pop in. I know you've also worked on, you were working on another musical or so.
I've written a couple musicals. I mean, musicals are, they're weird. They're fun. It is coming from the kind of rock world. It is odd that so many of us have ended up doing this thing that we all spent most of our lives hating with a passion. But musicals are great. I mean, it's a very odd thing. I mean, it's like, you ever watch operas or go to operas?
Operas?
Yeah.
I've been to one.
Okay.
Oh, I've been to a few.
I love opera, but opera is the weirdest. It requires more suspension of disbelief than any other art form ever imagined, because you're constantly asked to believe that people who look absolutely antithetical to the roles they're playing are those roles, and who do just the strangest things, by which I mean bursting into song all the time. And I mean, it's a ludicrous construct, the opera, but it's great. And musicals are kind of an outgrowth of that same thing. You have people singing, but it does this incredible magic trick. It's the only thing that does what we can do in fiction writing, which is to tell you what characters are thinking in addition to what they're saying, right? So, when you write for TV or movies, you have this kind of brick wall where you can only have them say what they say, and unless you're doing something, bringing in a pink rabbit to tell what they're thinking or something, you're stuck with the actor having to communicate what they're thinking. And in musicals, it's brilliant. Like, you get to be in this make-believe world where suddenly you can sing all the stuff that you think and feel and worry about, and then snap right back in the room, and no one's heard any of it except the audience, which is genius.
I never thought of it that way. I mean, I guess back in a weird way, Shakespeare used to do that with his soliloquies.
Sure, and the Greek chorus did it. I mean, it's always been the problem. Like, how do I convey things that people wouldn't actually say? Because, in most conversations, all the most interesting stuff is the stuff we're not saying, right? So in fiction, that's easy. You just say it. And, in screenwriting, you're at the mercy of actors. And, that is obviously a disastrous fate. Like, to have your message completely in the hands of people who aren't you. Not great.
Control element there.
So in musicals, you have the answer, right? So I have them sing the things that they're thinking and say the things that they're saying, and the gap between the two is right there on stage. It's great. Problem solved.
That's super cool. I know today you have, people are going to see this a little after, but today you have a single out. Is that correct?
Yeah, the first single off the New Tears record came out yesterday.
On October 8th. So did you write that, help co-write that one?
I wrote it, me and Roland wrote it. He wrote the words and the melody, and I just did the original kind of tracky bit.
So, and what's it called?
The Tipping Point.
The Tipping Point. And we'll have a link below for people if they want to check it out on.
Excellent.
Spotify or YouTube.
Hopefully by then they will have heard it so many times and be so sick of it that they
Hopefully.
wouldn't dream of
Not
like,
that song again.
Well, thank you for coming by and chatting with us again. We're delighted to have you.
Oh yeah, it's so fascinating to learn about wandering in all these different art forms.
Yeah,
and
you're
the
really,
similarities and the differences.
yeah, and how you kind of you ride this. I guess it's sort of like a razor blade over the top of all of them or through them all and kind of dip your toes into different places. It's pretty cool.
And when we end, we always end with the best thing we learned this week. But before I even tell you my best thing, because I'm going to start again, I wanted to say there's a story. I don't remember the poet. She lived out on the plains or whatever, but she used to talk about like seeing this poem coming down the plains, rushing down the plains, and she'd run to her house and get there to get a piece of paper and a pencil. And if she got there in time, she'd get down the poem. And if she didn't get there in time, she figured it was going on to some other poet. And
who was ready with a pen.
Right. Somebody who's got a pen ready. It's like.
But that's the old story, right? Wasn't that Coleridge's claim with Kubla Khan, right? That in Xanadu did Kubla Khan a pleasure dome decree. He said, he claimed fancifully that he dreamed the entire thing.
But I think it was after cocaine or something, or wormwood, wasn't it?
You say that like it's a bad thing.
No, I'm just saying it's part of it.
Yes, no, I think there was a wormwood component.
Yes, it sounded a little dismissive, Elizabeth. Like, well, I mean, if you do wormwood or cocaine, of course
you're going to. We have to access. Of course,
you're going to write one of the greatest poems.
But then he claimed someone disturbed him and he couldn't remember the whole rest. It was supposed to be much longer, which seems to be just a bald-faced lie because the structure of the poem seems quite complete and fully formed in and of itself. But you know, this is the story.
Yes, that he was disturbed and it's gone. Oh, so the best thing I learned this week, well, Andrea made me think of it when she was talking about these creatures that dry out and then reconstitute, if you will, when there's water. So I'm going to talk about tardigrades. They're these little microscopic creatures. You may have heard of them, also called moss piglets. They look really cute. They look like, I don't know, a cross between a hippopotamus and a vacuum cleaner that's really small. And they've been shot out into space and can survive radiation. But one thing they can also do is desiccate. You can totally desiccate their bodies, dry them out, and then later reconstitute them. And that's a real problem with humans and blood transfusion, because if you try and freeze blood, it'll, all the cells just break and you can't do that. But they're trying to study how the tardigrade does this. And if they can do that with blood, then they could just, it'd be a lot easier to do blood transfusions. Vampires wouldn't have to go out if they didn't want to. All these things.
Tardigrades are so cute. They are weird that they're so cute.
They're so ridiculously cute.
They are. So the cool thing I learned this week was that it was from the Oiseaux de France. They had posted, and Charlton can correct my French, they posted this cool, I'm going to try to show you guys this picture. I'm not sure it's going to show very well, but no, it doesn't. I have to get it in. No, I mean, you know what, the problem is my thing behind me too, but it's this really cool, they put a satellite tracker on a hawk that was almost at the bottom. It was in South Africa, way down at the bottom of Africa, and it was flying to Finland. And they followed it, and the thing it took 42 days for it to take the trip, and it did a complete straight line except when it hit water, and then it went a little bit around the water and came back. But ultimately, you can't see, but it was like it went from here to here, and it was just this crazy straight line up. You can't see my arm either when I do that, but yeah.
Oh,
that's really cool. Charlton,
your turn.
Let's see. It wasn't actually this week, but it was recently. So we've talked at some point about the AI versus human chemical versus electrical time scale issue, right? Bells?
No bells.
Like from an AI's perspective, we are trees. I guess that's where I'm going with this. We don't do anything. We just stand perfectly still. And every once in an enormous long time, we do something. So when I read about the mycorrhizae, roots, trees, fungus thing, that's self-explanatory, right?
To Elizabeth and I, it is.
Yeah. Mycorrhizal, it's the mushroom connections that connect trees.
So
and all
the
things.
idea that trees communicate over vast differences and help each other and do all these human-like, or maybe better than, social things, reaffirmed in a good way the notion that we are trees. That's it.
That's very good. I like that a lot.
Interesting.
Yeah, I hope we're trees.
Yeah.
Well, put it this way: when the AI gets up to speed, we become trees. We kind of fill in that ecological niche in the AI-driven future.
Interesting. You know, I've written a couple of shorts and read it too, where one of my shorts is the people, well, they just wash their hands all the time, but and so they become the upper class because people have to, you know, feed them and stuff because they have to wash their hands all the time. But they become, because of this, they don't die, and eventually they move out and become willow trees.
Oh, I like that.
So thanks. So
yeah, actually, it's odd. Elizabeth and I have both written a ton of tree stories and root stories.
People becoming people trees, or funguses taking over, like the cordyceps and ant fungus that, you know, makes it behave mechanically.
Oh yeah.
So, but people use the same fungus, right? Oh God, what's that called? Right? I want to say.
Don't look at me.
It's like a Reiki. It's a mushroom with an R, and they use it's in the cordyceps family. So people use it a lot too. So I wrote a story in which cordyceps does sort of the same thing it does to ants.
Yeah, we have fun with it.
We become automatons.
Well, it makes us do really benevolent things. We become benevolent, and we give all our excess stuff to people. And then there are all these rich people all over the world whose heads are exploding because the cordyceps is making them give their stuff away. And they're like, I can't. So that's
I love it. That's great.
Well, thank you again, Charlton.
Yes, and thank you, Maria. Thank you, Maria. And Alex Korolov for editing and shooting and doing everything. We couldn't do it without you.
And as always, we'd love to have you guys, our viewers, come by and like the video, leave comments, because we'd love to know what you think of it. And be sure to subscribe if you're interested, so that you can hit the notification button and you won't miss any episodes. And thank you. If you'd like to support us on Patreon, we would love it. And the links are in the description box below. And all of the donations go to paying for original speculative fiction on MetaStellar. The magazine's run by all volunteers, and all the money goes to our authors. So if you want to see more original speculative fiction, help us out. Thanks.